Here we are on the leap year day, February 29th. And what a great day it is. And I'm super excited for today's guest, literally joining us from all the way across the country in San Francisco. I'm going to give you a quick intro right here. Greg and I have been great friends for a long, long time, been colleagues in this crazy world of fundraising events. Greg is an amazing thought leader, and just the way that he looks at fundraising is awesome. So bio, San Francisco-based fundraising auctioneer, performer, and storyteller. Excellent consultant too, by the way. Greg's been conducting fundraising auctions for nonprofit organizations across the United States since 2004. Dang, he old. And he founded his firm, Stellar Fundraising Auctions, stellarsf.com, in 2014. As an avid storyteller, one of Greg's stories was recently featured on the Moth Radio Hour national broadcast. I told you, he's kind of a big deal. He and his wife run Stellar together and live in San Francisco with their son, Ryder. We might dive into Ryder's near future just a little bit, who is a professional auction spotter and will be attending college to study architecture this fall. And without any further ado, welcome my friend and yours, Greg Quiroga.
Thanks for having me, Bobby. Appreciate the chance to be here. And yeah, there are days when I do feel old. There are days when I feel like I've got a ton of experience, and other days when I feel like, oh, the gray has really come in.
You're telling me I just got my hair cut, and it's a good thing I'm blonde. Otherwise, this would be, it would be much, much grayer.
All I can tell you is embrace it, brother, because there's no stopping it.
We just got to own it. It's just, it's part of life, right? Right on.
Absolutely.
Well, Greg, tell me about tell me a little bit background. Like how did you find your way into this crazy world of gala fundraising?
It's one of those questions you get every time you do a gala, right? And you sit down to talk with a guest. And it's one of the reasons why I always ask to never be seated at a table with guests when I'm doing an event. Part of it is because I want to be able to focus, and my job is to be there and be on stage and be ready to perform. And people, bless them, are curious and they always want to know. And we work in a really, we're not a mainstream profession yet. We are not, I don't know if guidance counselors, my guidance counselor in high school certainly didn't say, I think you'd be a good fundraising auctioneer. I mean, they didn't even mention auctioneer because California, we don't have a ton of those out here.
Right.
But I was an interactive marketing consultant at the turn of the millennium. I had been doing, I was the second person hired to work in one of the first interactive marketing divisions of a public relations firm in the United States. And the company that I worked for, I got to work on projects like Yahoo and Pixar and Sendin's Net Market and all these big interactive marketing things. And we were basically defining interactive marketing. It was the wild, wild west. I mean, one of the biggest campaigns that I did early on was an affinity linking campaign for gay.com. And I took them from 4 inbound links to over 300 links in a couple of weeks, and it was fun to be out there, trying to make these connections between individuals and companies on the web in 1996, 97. I know I'm an old man. And at the turn of the millennium, I had my own little interactive marketing consultancy. I'd gone solo, and that basically meant that I was just kind of figuring out where it was and what I was going to do next. And I started to feel the tide receding. Ford had a $1,500 a month ad buy through me. I mean, not just puny, right? $1,500 a month for ad buy with Ford. And they pulled it back in-house. And I thought, okay, this is bad. This is, you can feel it coming. And one of my good friends, who I'm still very good friends with, was like, hey, my company needs a complete rewrite of their website. And so they were an online auction company, and I did a complete rewrite of all the copy for their website. And they said, hey, we love you. We'd appreciate you. Like, why don't you come in-house and be our interactive marketing manager? And I went to work with them. They twisted my arm. And, I took full-time work in Benny's. I'm like, hey, ow, give me solid work. And 2 weeks into my tenure with them, they're like, hey, they had a live auction component to the company as well that I didn't know about. It wasn't that wasn't any part of the website I rewrote. And they said, hey, you'd make a good spotter. You should go. And so I went irritated because I was like, this isn't my job. I'm working 60 hours a week. I don't have time for this, blah, blah, blah. And I came home enthralled and told my wife, I want to do that. And so I spent a year angling to become an auctioneer with that company. We did the wine.com liquidation. That was scheduled for September 14th, 2001. So you can imagine that was not a good time to be trying to do a auction liquidation. I did liquidations for a few years and loved the auctioneering, but hated the heartlessness of it, of always sounding the death toll for other people's dreams. And I'd seen just enough to know that fundraising was a possibility. And my wife, who's always been smarter than me, said, you should talk to somebody who does this for a living before you commit our future to it. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. So I got a bunch of questions together and Googled fundraising auctioneer San Francisco and found a guy who at that time had been doing it for 20 years and got a sit down informational interview and parlayed that into sending him a Christmas card and sending him videotape of me doing my first event. And eventually he relented and brought me on board. And I worked for him for 9 years before I founded my own company in 2014.
Nice. So no desire or ever, like you said, vision to ever be an auctioneer, just ended up in this space.
If you look at my career, it seems like I had a vision and a purpose and a path, right? Because everything kind of leads towards the next thing that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I was just following passions. I was doing things that were interesting to me, and sometimes I was good at, other times not so good. I spent a year as a salesperson for a database consulting company. And, I'm like, oh, I'll get into sales. I'll be great at sales. Well, it turns out some things are harder to sell than others. And database consultants is a really dry
God, that sounds so boring.
Again, it was all very, it helped me build a skill set that was relevant when the time came. I was totally used to hearing no.
Oh, that's good.
In our job, we get told no a lot. People remember the yeses, but I get told no hundreds of times every time I get on stage.
Yeah. And we're having the auctions, we're trying to find the high bidders, and it could be a room of 500 people and only one is going to be the final one that says yes. They all say no. It happens. And you know what?
Every yes up until that point and every consideration, everything, I consider every bid, every time somebody raises their paddle, whether it's for $100 or $100,000, it's what they can do. And every bid, every paddle raise, every bit of participation is a courageous and a supporting act. And so I always try to come at it from a place of total and absolute positivity. I appreciate everybody who's at these events and is participating.
Nice. Now, Greg, you specialize in something very niche. I know you do a whole bunch of wine auctions, like across the country. And you're kind of like the wine auctioneer. Let's talk a little bit about
there are
wine
a few
event
really good
philanthropy. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, kind of like what that looks like.
Sure. And I will say, I'm going to give the props out too. There's a group of us. There's probably 5 to 10 people in the fundraising auction world who do wine events specifically. And there are some people who came from the wine world, like Ursula Hermann-Chesky has been on the wine side. She's also worked for Sotheby's or Christie's, I forget which, and brings a lot of wine knowledge and experience. I came at it from the fundraising side, so my approach has always been that. But the interesting thing about wine events, what makes them really unique is in our world. In my world, the goal is to be selling relationships. If you're talking about a fundraising auction lot, something that we're going to sell, then retail is the base level, right? Like that's the basis for, and if your people can price it, they will. And then the next level up on that pyramid is access, right? If you can offer your people access to something that they otherwise couldn't get, then they're going to overspend. And then the pinnacle, the top of that pyramid are relationships. And whenever we are on stage selling a relationship, whenever I'm on stage selling a relationship, I know it makes my job easier. We raise more money for the charity. It gives the bidder access to something that they otherwise would not get. And ultimately, it's beneficial for the person on stage as well. So with respect to wine and wine auctions, there are a number of wine auctions around the country. In the 80s, a lot of wine auctions got started. A lot of the fundraising auctions that proliferated around the country in the 80s were first and foremost wine auctions. That's how my mentor got his start. Was he just literally flew around the country doing wine auctions. When I got started in 2004, almost every charity did a fundraising auction at that point. My word of mouth blew up locally, and I had 32 events, 28 of them within a 2-hour drive of home within a year. His events at that time were all over the country because he was doing primarily wine auctions. And so wine auctions are a combination of, you got to, obviously there has to be a charity. There has to be some heartfelt root cause that people are going to want to engage in. But then also you get vintners who travel all over the country to go and pour their wines, and also donate auction lots. And I thought, when I first got started, I thought, well, that's crazy. Why would a vintner spend all of this time and money and product to travel across the country to, I used to work with the Sun Valley Center for the Arts on their wine auction. I did their auction for, I think, 15 years, 2007 to 2022. That's 15. And in one of the early years, and there are, and a lot of these wine auctions are destination events. It's very seldom is it, you show up and there's an auction and then everybody goes home. And there's nothing wrong with that format. That's a gala format that most of us are familiar with. But wine auctions tend to be more destinations. And if you talk to vintners, they'll tell you they want more than just one evening with a chance to really get to people. And so Sun Valley was a classic example of that. There's a pig roast on Wednesday night to celebrate the vintners. There's vintner dinners on Thursday night, and then the big auction on Friday night, and then a picnic on Saturday, right? I mean, it's just like, it's a full week of events. Yeah. And so the morning after the pig roast, I'm walking through town on my way to breakfast, and Stuart Bryant of Pride Mountain Vineyards pulls over. He's like, "Hey, Greg, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm going to get breakfast." He's like, "Join me?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So we go and we sit and have this, lovely breakfast. And I asked him, I said, "Stuart, so why are you here? What is it that you get out of supporting events like this?" And he said, "Greg, I'll tell you really simply. I could spend $10,000, $15,000 on an ad buy with the Wine Spectator." And I mean, no offense to the Wine Spectator. It's a great magazine, does great work. But from a vintner's perspective, he's like, I could put an ad in there. I'm going to reach, I don't know how many eyeballs, and I'm going to have no idea how many of those people. This is before QR codes. This is before like really specific marketing opportunities that you could utilize, but from print to media. But he's like, I'm not going to have any idea how many people actually come and buy my wines, if any. It's like, or I could hop a flight, bring a couple cases of wine, get to pour my wines face to face with people and get to meet them during the tasting. And then, and sign customers up, because that's part of the deal. Like, good wine auctions know that vintners need to sign up customers, sign up some customers, and then donate an auction lot for 2 couples to come spend a weekend with us. And if that sells for anywhere from $6,000 to $20,000, we're doing great work for the charity. And I'm getting really highly qualified customers who are going to be customers for life.
I see. Okay. So then that's that relationship. Okay.
So the vintners donate opportunities for bidders to come do things with them. And lots of, we try not to make it all the same. Like, and now it's a trip for 4 people to spend 3 nights and 4 days in Napa, staying in a private guest house on a vineyard with 4 private VIP tours and tastings and 2 vintner dinners sold. Now it's a trip to Napa to spend, we try not to make it all the same. We try to get, and vintners are creative. They understand. But that's the basis. And then lots of vintners will also say, like, hey, the auction's great. If they want to do a vintner dinner the night before, I would love to participate in that as well. And so you get a lot of vintner dinners that are, anywhere from 20 to 40 people. That's about as large as you would want it to get, because it starts to lose its intimacy when you get above 40. But 20 to 40 people and a couple of good chefs, and usually a couple of 2 or 3 vintners, and they pour their wines. And so I am fortunate enough to work with Shuttle Cork. It's a play on shuttlecock from badminton for the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City. They've got these giant 30-foot, you look it up, everybody. They've got these giant 30-foot shuttlecocks on their property, these huge sculptures that are on the museum's grounds. They're cool. Yeah, thank you. And So when it came time for them to found a wine auction, they're like, well, let's be clever. They call it shuttle cork. And so they have they have vintner dinners on Thursday night. Friday afternoon, they have a welcome barbecue for all the vintners that's called shuttle pork. Wait for it, right? And then Friday night we do the auction. And they get some really interesting and creative lots, and vintners really go all out to participate. But those vintner dinners they do, I'm going to say 6 to 8 vintner dinners around Kansas City on Thursday night.
Okay.
And, what's interesting also is that doing events around the country gives you an idea for how different regions function. And I say things, I constantly say like, oh, Kansas City has sneaky money, right?
Yes,
In the sense that their cost of living is lower, no offense, but it is. Their cost of living is lower than San Francisco or New York, but the wages tend to be pretty similar at the higher end jobs, right? To be competitive, you got to be able to compete with. So the wages are pretty similar, but your money goes farther. So used to be, a decade ago, I would show up for a vintner dinner and I was often the youngest person there. Right. And I was just used to being the youngest guy in the room. And I show up in Kansas City and I'm not. I'm sitting at a table with a bunch of 30 somethings. And so I'm like, try to learn as I get older how to ask tactful questions. And instead of saying like, so is your dad buy your ticket? Right. I was like,
right.
What brings you to this event? And they're like, oh, we just decided it would be cool. So we bought tickets. Right. So here you have in Kansas City, a bunch of 30 somethings with disposable income getting interested in supporting philanthropy, which is, really cool. And it's fascinating to get to see. And, the wine events, it's funny. There's a circuit. I see a bunch of the same vintners at a bunch of places around the country. And what's beautiful is I have a really good relationship with a lot of them. And I have learned early on to embrace them as the celebrity of our event. And I will always invite someone on stage if we are selling a relationship with them, because, I can't tell you if you like a wine, right? Like I can't. It's like telling you like art, right? Like the piece behind me, like if that's your thing, great. If not, I can't convince you to like it, right? I happen to love it, and it resonates with me. But if I was going to try and sell you that piece of art, what I would do is I would sell you on the artist, right? If you have an emotional connection to the piece, then great. All I can try to do is justify that emotional connection by telling you things about the artist that justify overspending. And it's the same thing with wine, right? Yeah. Wine, there's a couple of things that matter. The story about the vintner.
Yep.
And, or the wine or how they made it. And if you're a score chaser, then scores, right? So I'll tell you a story. I'll give you a great example of this. Good buddy of mine is Sam Lando. And Sam Lando used to be with Costa Brown. And if you know Costa Brown was the Wine Spectator Wine of the Year in 2011. Dan Costa, Michael Brown, great story. Two guys came up, blew up after just 10 years of grinding on it, right? Maxing out their credit cards to get their first wine started. And they brought along a couple of great guys, Tony Lombardi, Sam Lando, who worked with them and then branched off and went their own way. Sam Lando makes his own Pinot, Lando Pinot. Great guy, bigger heart. And in 2017, Sam finally built his own winery, his own production facility, but he didn't want to move his wines yet. They were in a different winery where, for years he'd use this other winery to press his grapes and store his wines in barrels, and it was time to bottle. He didn't want to move the barrels in 2017 because he didn't want to stir up the sediment and have to wait longer. So he said, I'll just bottle this vintage and next vintage will be pressed in my facility. 2017, horrific fires in Sonoma. They tear through Sonoma County. And one of the only vineyards and wineries that burned down is where Sam's wines were stored.
Oh, no.
So he loses his entire 2017 vintage, right? Just gets burned to the ground. Oh. And his first reaction was to turn around and launch a charity event to raise money for all of the restaurant workers and winery workers who were put out of work by the fires. Right. His second reaction was to reach out to his friends in the wine world and say, look, if you could spare a quarter barrel, half a barrel, anything you can spare for me of Pinot. What I want to do is put together a blend, a Lando Phoenix Rising blend, to try to save this vintage for myself. And his friends in the wine world, they're like, no, not a quarter barrel, not a half barrel, whatever you need, take it. It's yours. And so Sam basically rebuilds his entire vintage with donated barrels of wine from different friends and does the Lando Phoenix Rising blend. And if at the end of that story, you don't want to see the bottle and possibly taste it, I can't say any more, right? I can't tell you anything else that's going to make you interested in that wine. But hopefully at the end of it, you're like, oh, this guy, and Sam's great. If you're interested, call Sam. Like, Sam's a wonderful guy. You're going to be in Healdsburg. Anybody coming out to California, look up Sam Lando. Tell him I sent you. He's a lovely man. But he's one of the ones who's always on me, like, this event needs to have a vintner dinner. This event needs to do more. This event, like, this isn't.
He gets it.
He does.
That's awesome. I mean, so. Are there still bottles of the Phoenix Rising out there? I mean, there's some in collections?
I'm sure people have them in their wine. I'm sure. I mean, that Sam, his wines in general are sold out. Like most of the wineries that we talk about, like being really, like, the whole concept of a cult wine started again in the 80s. You had really small production vineyards, like Grace Family Vineyards was arguably one of the first cult wines. Screaming Eagle was definitely one of the first extremely high value cult wines. But cult at this point has kind of become a word that just means, like, it sells out quickly and lots of people want it and you can't get it. And Sam is in that, like, his stuff sells out. You can't get it. Right. He holds I don't know if he still holds it, but he used to hold the record for the single highest auction lot, the most raised on a single auction lot at the High Wine Auction for the High Museum in Atlanta.
Wow. So how much was that? I'm curious.
Well, Sam, because he's learned from the best, Sam did a buy-in for 100 couples to be at the new Atlanta Braves Stadium when it was just opening up. So that puts this in, that dates this auction lot. And because he's friends with the families that own those, that run the Braves and own that facility. So he got a bunch of other vintners and a couple of chefs and a musical act and sold 100 couples at $2,500 per couple.
So let me do the math quick. 2,500 a couple times 100 couples. That's what? 2.5?
Quarter million.
Oh, 250. Right? I can't do math. Yeah. $250,000. Yeah.
Okay. $250,000. But I think that's their record. I mean, it was for a while on a single auction lot.
That is beautiful. So one thing that you had mentioned is, being able to travel the country and see all of these different markets, Atlanta, Kansas City, San Francisco. What are some of the variations that you're noticing as you're, kind of moving through the different markets?
What's interesting is that, so there's a wine auction I work with for the Tum Tum Tree Foundation. And when I first got brought in to work on their auction, one of the things I do is, like most of us that consult heavily on our events, I recommend a lot order, and I like to at least be in touch on opening bids. Right. I want to make sure 0809 during that crash, I made a commitment to having opening bids that we could stick to, because what I didn't want in the wake of this, that recession was, I didn't want it to turn into, we'll start the bidding at $1,000. I mean, 500. Okay. 250. Right. I get that is a tactic that works for lots of auctioneers, but on me personally, I wanted to be able to come out and say to donors, I hear you on the value of your auction lot, and we're going to respect that and start at 50%. And, that's where I like to start, 50% of value and go. And if somebody has a quote priceless item, then we really need to discuss it and make sure that we understand where we're starting. And I will get to, I haven't lost track of the original question, but I'm an auctioneer and I'm long-winded, and you said we still got a few minutes. So,
and we all have ADD. So
yeah, exactly. Like, squirrel. So yeah. At this one particular auction, we had a board member who had donated dinner for 10 at their house paired with wines, and they valued it at $7,000. This is a local auction in the Bay Area. They valued it at $7,000, which meant that my opening bid was $3,500, right? And so I come out and I pitch the auction lot and I say, okay, now it's going to start the opening bid at $3,500. And the crowd looks at me like, what? You're insane. Huh? And we grind and we grind and we get like 1 or 2 bids and it sells for like $3,700. That same evening, I had dinner at what was then Michael Chiarello's new restaurant, Bottega. It's been a while now, but again, you can date all my stories by Googling Bottega opening date. Michael Chiarello's Bottega had just opened up, and he donated dinner for 6 at the restaurant. Skip the line; he'll come hang out at the table with you. And he put a value of $600 on it because that's how much the food was going to cost. And we opened the bidding at $600. I'm like, this is crazy. Michael's so generous. Open the bidding at $600 and go. It sells for like $5,000. Right. So it's not necessarily where you start that's important. It's where you end. But the other thing is that the audience needs to have a perception of value in line with where we're trying to start the bidding. Right.
Yes.
So 08 crash, I'm like working really hard to establish, this is before 08. So 08 crash, I'm working really hard to establish opening bids. Right. Fast forward to 2015. I start working with the Tum Tum Tree Foundation, and they're in Birmingham, Alabama. Sneaky money in Birmingham too, and they're in Birmingham, Alabama. And I say, okay, well, looking through the spreadsheet, I see that the opening bids, I see a column for opening bids, but they're all the same as the value. And they're like, yeah, that's where we start.
Really? So then everything over that is pure philanthropy.
And everything sells for 2x. It's so fun, Bobby. It is so fun. I mean, don't get me wrong. Every auction can be fun, but I mean, just come out and say, okay, here's a collection, 2 cases of Bordeaux. Everybody loves Bordeaux. If I have to tell you why you should like Bordeaux, then you really need to buy the slot so you can figure out why you like Bordeaux. We'll start the bidding. It's valued at $5,000. We'll start the bidding at $5,000 and go. And it sells for 10, and it's super fun, right? And so, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is for all the differences from town to town, and there's the things that you can expect, right? Like, in Birmingham, college football is king.
Yeah.
In Kansas City, professional football is king. Right. And these are
especially this last year.
Yeah, we have a fun rivalry going between the
that's right. Crew. Oh yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. My bio this year, I said, can I wait till after the Super Bowl to write my bio for your auction? And they said, oh sure, good luck.
Yep, nice.
So I got to start my bio with Greg Quiroga has been doing our auction long enough that he remembers when Patrick Mahomes hadn't beat the Niners twice in the Super Bowl. And I got to end my bio with Ryder's, and Greg's son Ryder is a professional auction spotter whose favorite pitcher remains Madison Bumgarner.
Nice,
which is a because I'm me, Madison Bumgarner was the pitcher who shut down the Kansas City Royals for 5 straight innings of relief pitching in Game 7 of the World Series to basically shut the door on them and win the World Series in 2012. So
yeah, just a little salt in the wound there. All right.
Like I'll take, but I'll give too. So it's fun traveling around. I mean, one of the things that you see is that the differences are fewer than the similarities.
Okay.
From crowd to crowd, from region to region. What you get often, I mean, obviously in California, people have access to Napa and I've sold Napa wine in Napa and that can be a challenge if it's all Napa
Ice Cubes
people.
Eskimos, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I've had incredible lots in Napa, and it wasn't until this one auction started bringing people in from out of town and really working on making it a destination event that their auction lots went from selling for like $4,000 to $5,000 to $6,000 to $20,000.
Wow. Okay, so tell me this. I get questions all the time. What's the new up and coming wine region? Like where's everybody kind of like, we got to go there?
Paso Robles.
Ooh, okay. All right.
Paso,
good.
Paso is Central California. It's about 3.5 hours south of San Francisco. It's a couple hours north of Santa Barbara. It's a lovely small town. There's lots of great vintners that have been making wines there for 30 plus years. You can still, for the most part, call ahead, drive in, and do tastings where you get to meet the proprietors. And
Cool.
if you're going to Paso Robles, look up Chris Cherry of Villa Creek. Look up Booker Vineyards. I can give you a bunch of other ones to look up, but Paso,
look at this. Greg's creating an auction lot for you all right now.
Well, and these are people I see all over. Eric Jensen of Booker Vineyards and I became really fast friends when I first met him at a wine auction. I said, "Hey, I see we've got an auction lot with you. I would love for you to come on stage and say a few words about it." He's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." He's like, "Okay." He's like, "Every other auctioneer I've ever met wants to keep me off stage." And after we met him, I said, after he spoke a couple of times, pulled off his shirt one time on stage and said, "This isn't going for enough." But I went for 100,000. So, what are you going to do?
Right.
But, after I'd known him for a while, I said, "Jensen, now I see why people don't want you on stage, but you're still welcome up here, buddy." Because at the end of the day, we're selling relationships. But Paso's a good, like, if you're looking for a place that people haven't been, you can fly directly into San Luis Obispo. And from there, it's a 40-minute drive. There's lots of good wine in San Luis Obispo as well.
Nice.
If you want, like, the ultimate high-end wine and food experience, Healdsburg right now is crazy booming hot. The Matheson, Dustin Vallette's Matheson restaurant is insane. They took an entire building and completely renovated it and turned it into a multi-level, multi-story restaurant experience that's just bonkers.
Wow.
And right now, a lot of the vintners are really mad with Napa. A lot of Napa vintners you shouldn't talk out of school, but a lot of vintners have expressed their concern with hotel prices in Napa.
Oh my God, right? It's kind of getting priced out for just kind of the average person to be able to go and have that experience in Napa. It's like,
if you can find a hotel for $750 a night in Napa, book it.
Whoa. Wow.
Because it's just gone crazy.
Yeah. It's a supply and demand. That's auctions for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are some of the fundraising trends that you're seeing that are kind of evolving in this? I know you and I had a conversation last week kind of talking about this, but what are you seeing, or what are some of the things that you're starting to kind of implement to shake things up a little bit within these auctions and fundraising events?
Good question. And that's always the number one question, right? Like, what's the hot lot? What should we be doing this year?
Yeah.
And
or something, or a strategy or something.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. One of the things that I've been on for a couple of years now, but I'm sticking with it, has been the sponsor a spot lot.
Okay.
And it's similar to a buy-in. And a buy-in is where you're selling, units, multiple opportunities. So it could be per person, it could be per couple, it could be per team for an amazing race kind of thing. It could be per table for a barn dance or whatever. Buy a spot is where you're purchasing for yourself. I'm going to buy this and I get it. Sponsor a spot is where you are purchasing the opportunity for a beneficiary of the charity to do something. And I first saw this, long time ago, pre-pandemic, the before times, with Boys and Girls Club in St. Helena. And we had the opportunity, we had 16 tickets to an A's game, Oakland A's, maybe not much longer, but at the time they were the Oakland A's. And they have a local supporter who has a transportation company. So, does wine tours, has minivans and whatnot. And we said, okay, we're going to send 16 kids to their first professional baseball game. And we're going to offer the opportunity at $1,000 per kid for people to sponsor it. And it sold out. Just boom, it was done. And I said, great, thank you. And this is where one of the important things of my job is to learn lessons. And sometimes I learn lessons easily. Sometimes I learn lessons the hard way. This is one where I learned a lesson the hard way because I said, great, fantastic. That's amazing. You've done it. On we go. And a board member came up and said, guy at my table wants to sponsor another kid to go to the game. And I said, I'm sorry. We only had 16. We're sold out. He can donate to the fund in need, right? And so we get to the end of the auction and the board member comes back to me and says, he's really pissed. He didn't want to donate to the fund in need. He wanted to send a kid to the baseball game. Wow. And I was like, wow, okay, mea culpa, lesson learned. For $1,000, we could have bought a kid the ticket on StubHub and sent him in his own private limo and still made $750, right?
Right.
But it also underscored something really important, which is people latch on to narratives and don't always want to participate. You can't dictate which narrative they're going to be interested in to them. Right. And the concept of sponsoring a kid to do something, or sponsoring, a member of, somebody who is a beneficiary of the organization to do something, is a really powerful narrative for people. So fast forward, first event back post pandemic, 2021, Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Bay Area. They obviously have matches, right? A big and a little, and they get the Giants and the San Francisco Giants and the San Francisco 49ers each donate like 10 or 15 pairs of tickets, right? So a lot of tickets. We've got like 25 tickets, 25 pairs. So I say, okay, who wants to sponsor a match to go to a game, right? Like the
big and a little go.
Right. Bigs have this responsibility, and oftentimes it's a financial responsibility as well. So who wants to sponsor a big? We sell all 25, no problem. Bam, 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 on we go. The following year, so last year, they say this year we've got 40 pairs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that seems like a lot. They're like, yeah, we know, but what are we going to do? So we sell all 40. And my first thought is, wow, did we just doom the fund a need, right? Like, let's find out. So we get to the fund a need, we do the fund a need, we do all the levels, we come all the way down, we get to the $1,000 level, and we have just as many pledges at $1,000 as we had the year before. Wow. Didn't touch it. So to me, this says again that the power of the narrative is really important. And we know from data tracking, right? You've heard me say this numerous times, but I'm an auctioneer and I love to repeat myself. We know that somebody who bids on an auction item and does not win that auction item will then donate 10% of their maximum bid, right? Statistically speaking, there's outliers for every data set. I'm an outlier in many ways in my life, but there's outliers for every data set. But generally speaking, looking at the numbers, if somebody bids $5,000 on an auction item and does not win that auction item, they're only going to give you $500 in the fund a need. Right? That's the way the data works, right? So
there's the misconception Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, as I say, that's the misconception we get all the time. They're like, oh, let's do the fund a need after the live auction, because if they don't win something in the live auction, they'll give it in the fund a need. But like what you just said,
and they will, but they'll give 10% of what they were going to give, right? Like you're not, and if you have a really long auction, I mean, I don't think people are doing like 40 lot auctions and doing the fund a need last, but I mean, to me, and then it's an interesting point, because to me, I think the auction serves a purpose of teeing up the fund a need. So I think given my druthers, I would always do at least 5 lots before we had the fund a need, just because it establishes my credibility. It devalues money. Like once you get these highly competitive, sometimes irrationally philanthropic people who are competing each other for stuff they don't need to support a great cause, and you're able to sell dessert served to your table for $2,000, right? Then all of a sudden donating seems like, just giving money seems rational and inexpensive in comparison. But but it also says that these people, like the concept of the narrative, it doesn't always have to be acquisition for themselves, right? It's acquisition at some level that is important. So all those people who gave $1,000 to sponsor a match to go to a game, like, were they $100 fund a need donors? Like, and that's an interesting point. I should go back and try to track like what they did in the fund a need. If we have that data, it'd be fascinating. I'll get back to you on that one.
So this is kind of our running theme for our episode here, is talking about those relationships and then the story behind like the auction lot, or the story behind, that individual. And I love that, the sponsor, the spot, or whatever that is. And now the donor gets to be an actual part of, in this example, the big and the little, their story. And that might be the first game that the little goes to. And then for, and like you were saying, acquisition, as the donor, they're acquiring that story to tie into their own story, because they're going to go to the parties, they're going to go to dinner. They're like, oh yeah, we were at this event, we got the sponsor Big and Little, they got to go to the first, and that's the value.
Yeah. And, and the good organizations make sure that they get pictures of the kids or the big and the little enjoying
Smart.
their day at the game, because, and use it as marketing and follow up, right? Like the good organizations remind people of the good they've helped make happen.
Yeah.
Because we form long-term memories when there is an emotion tied to a moment. Right. And
Yep.
we don't remember the food unless it's bad, right? Because it
Or
made
the
us
or the
angry.
gala if it's bad.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But if you can create an emotional moment and then remind people of that emotional moment, and maybe even with more emotions at some other point in time during the year, now you're building a relationship, right? I mean, what like
Right.
the best communication I hear from bidders is they're like, "Oh my gosh, we love this event. It's like a family reunion that we get to have once a year."
Hmm.
Right? We get to see each other. Like this is like we only see these people one time a year, but this is we get to all get together and do this. And like that, amen. That's it. We're good.
Yes. That's everything. That's everything right there. And
Yeah.
it is, I mean, I'm always preaching, experience is really paramount. And I love
Hmm.
that, combining the emotion with the experience, like that's what sticks in people's brains. And Greg, you and I can geek out on this stuff so much. Like we can talk auctions, we can talk fund and need, we can talk all of this. But what's a misconception that you're seeing when you're talking with your clients or potential clients, where they're kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to do it this way, or this is the way we've always done it. And you're kind of like, well, wait a minute, let's talk about this.
Oh, that's a good question. And I think so. Here's one. A recent client just had just this is the top of mind. It's because it's the freshest. They wanted to break up the auction and the fund and need.
Okay.
They wanted to do them separately. So do the auction, have a dinner break, come back after the dinner break, then do the emotional tee up for the fund and need and get into the fund and need.
Yeah.
And I guess the misconception there is that the two are separate entities when I really see them as being very, very tightly woven. Another misconception is that the room needs to be, okay, here it is. This is my favorite one because it happens every time. The
Yes.
misconception is that the room needs to be quiet while I'm working. That I need an attentive crowd, that we need to, and it's absolutely not the truth, right?
Okay.
I am not an auctioneer that gets on stage and
Yeah.
spends a lot of time. No, everybody focus on me, on me. No, back of the room.
Yeah.
It's irritating. Like
Yeah.
anybody
Oh
who's
yeah.
listening to this podcast, you're mad at me by now, right? And I've only done it for 30 seconds, right? No, if I'm tasked with emceeing an event, which happens increasingly since the pandemic, if I'm tasked with
Mm.
emceeing an event, I make a compact with the crowd at the very beginning. I just did this recently. My first event of the year was the beginning of February, and I was emceeing, and the crowd was not sitting down to eat,
Okay.
and we had not done a good job of setting the timeline. I mean, one of the things you got to do is you got to get somebody on stage at the very beginning of dinner, just so everybody knows, oh yeah, we're supposed to sit down and eat. Because
Yes.
a good crowd that is, excited to see each other, at least 4 tables will stand and talk until somebody gets on stage and tells them to sit down, right? So
Yeah.
take that into account. And so this crowd, like we finally we get the program going, get everybody seated, and I got up and started doing my introductory speech, my talk, and they were talking and talking and talking and talking. And finally, I was almost to the point where I'm supposed to introduce the development director, who's going to introduce the new CEO, and who's going to introduce the first of 2 videos. And that was, I'll pull the card out twice if I'm MC, once if I'm just auctioneer, right? I pulled
Okay.
it out at the very beginning. I said, look, here's the deal. Here's the deal. We're excited to see you. We're glad you're here. We're going to give you ample opportunity to party and talk and have a good time. But we also have some amazing stories we want you to hear. We have some incredible opportunities for you to learn about and then support an organization and the people that we're here to live. So let's make a deal, right? You focus the 2 times. I'm going to ask you 2 times. This is number 1, right? I'm going to ask you one more time. You focus when we need it, and the rest of the time you party. Can we make that deal? No,
And
no.
everybody's like,
Can we make that deal? Right. Yeah. Okay, great.
yeah.
On we go. So, but so often I have, board members or committee members come to me and say, oh, we just got to get the crowd to quiet down while you're doing the auction. We got to, I'm like,
right.
no, please don't. Like,
Yeah.
let them, like, as long as they're not over the top, right? As long as
Right.
they're not so loud that we can't hear the auction, right? And then this comes back to one of the most important things is the sound system.
Yep.
Right?
Got to have that.
Like you got to have good sound, and it's got to be surround sound, right? It can't just be two speakers blaring at you because the people in front will be deaf and they will hate you, and the people in back won't be able to hear and they'll hate you, and it's just bad all the way around, right? It's got to be like a good, solid surround sound auction system, and we got to be able to raise the volume enough so that if I want to listen to the auction, I can, and if you want to talk to the other people at the table, you can, and we won't be mad at each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're all in this. So, we're all in this experience together.
I think another misconception is that value alone begets results on auction lots.
Okay. Tell me more.
That I brought in this lot. It's worth $10,000. Great. Who's going to bid on it? Right? We are not magic spells that you cast on your auction and suddenly, oh my gosh, like you and I are good. You're good at what you do. You get on stage and you're going to raise more money for people than an auctioneer who is only trained in doing autos. And that person's going to raise more than a volunteer who's never done it before. Right. Yep. But in terms of like professionalism, like you and I are both adept in our own ways at engaging a nonprofit audience and helping them achieve their philanthropic potential. But that philanthropic potential has to exist, and expectations have to have been set. Right. I've sat around the table with a group of people and they said, oh, this lot's worth $50,000. Great. That's more than anything's ever sold for at our auction. Who's going to bid on it? Oh, well, there'll be people. Like, one of the things I hate to hear more than anything else is we're going to have a great auction. We've got a bunch of people who have a ton of money who are coming. Right.
But that doesn't necessarily breed the success of the event. Like, yeah, we could have a room of billionaires, but if they don't care about the organization, you're not getting a penny.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Hit it on the
so
nose
the other misconception is if you build it, they come and spend, and that's not true. Like we have the fun part, but a lot of the work that goes into making events successful includes marketing auction lots in advance. And it's not just like, oh, here's an email blast, here's our hot list. Or, it's like calling people like, hey, Bobby, I heard you're into Paso Robles. Well, this auction that you're coming to this coming Saturday, we've got a trip to Paso, and you're going to go stay at the Crowd Family Inn, and you're going to get a couple of wine tastings. You should check out the catalog before that Saturday night just to make sure the blackout dates work, so you're not surprised, right? Yeah. Just little expectation management from the people who are peers with potential bidders has the possibility to really set the stage for success.
Right on. All right. So, friends, if you're listening to that was like a huge value nugget right there, because I'm always saying you have to have prepared bidders at the event. If they're not prepared to bid, just like you said, they're not going to give you a dime. But just taking it that one step further, actually picking up the phone and calling someone. I mean, what a novel idea here in 2024. Like, would that ever happen? But how effective that is. And again, setting those expectations, like, this is a great item. This is helping to, connect with this cause and helping to fund this mission, whatever it might be. And then it's that connection to the item and the cause, which I love to see, and I've kind of coined a term called radical generosity, and it's that radical generosity, that people are combining the two together, tied with that experience of all of these people coming together at the gala, and their electricities and their energies, and that party atmosphere that's going on there, and then how that all breeds into that one little, kind of that fundraising moment, whatever that is, that the crowd understands. They're like, oh, wow, we have a chance to make a big impact.
Yeah, love it. Well put, well summarized.
Yeah, that's it. So, Greg, I thank you so much. I can't believe like that time went so fast. Like, here we are. Wow, 50 minutes like that. And
agreed.
We got to do this again sometime.
Yeah, well, and as you alluded to a couple of times, like I'm in the genesis, the early stages of putting together something. So when it is up and running, I will definitely call you, because we're going to talk war stories. We're going to talk real down and dirty, like this is what happened and this is what we learned, good ways and bad ways from fundraising galas. And I'm sure that you and Aaron have a ton of great stories. So I look forward to reciprocation, sir.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, because that's there's so much that's able to be learned out of that. So, Greg, where can our friends find you if they want to have the one and the only Greg Quiroga to be their auctioneer?
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. You can find me and my company at Stellar SF, STELLAR, SF is in San Francisco.com. We're bad at the social media, so you can find us there on our website. We've got a YouTube channel up and running as well. It's youtube.com/StellarSF. And there we go. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much for just filling my brain up. Again, this is very selfish of me because I'm learning as much as our listeners and viewers are learning. And lots of great. I'm going to use some of this stuff this weekend when I'm at my auction. So really appreciate it. But most of all, I appreciate you, our viewers and our listeners, so much for investing time within this podcast to make your events better. And that's what it's all about: making events better, raising more money, and making a bigger impact. And by you listening, you're absolutely doing that. So make sure you go do all the things, the likes, the reviews, the subscribes, get on the website right there, stellarsf.com. And thank you so much again, Bobby D. Follow us on Instagram, Gala Auctioneer. She's there. And Star Auctions is there. At Inspire Hearts is there. Follow me at Bobby D Auctioneer. And you can follow us on TikTok as well. A couple of auctioneers. So I want to thank everybody again for watching. And we'll see you next time right here on Heart of the Gala.